Good evening. This is a notification for City Council members that we're going to be starting the Mayor's 2019 budget presentation. If we can get everybody in their seats, that would be appreciated. Good afternoon, good evening. This is August 6, 2018, and it is about 5:30 in the evening, and this is the time scheduled for the Mayor Steve Allender's 2019 budget presentation. If there's no other hesitation, I'd like to go ahead and just turn it over to the Mayor for his presentation. Mayor?
Okay, thank you and good evening.
I'm sorry, I guess we need to, I thought we were going to do the official meeting at 7, so I guess this is an official meeting. If you'll hold on a second, Mayor, we do have to do a roll call and Pledge of Allegiance. So I guess we'll go ahead and start this meeting with a roll call of the City Council members present. Please, Heidi.
Scott. Here. Drew. Here. Nordstrom. Here. Modrick. Here. Solomon. Here. Lewis. Here. Armstrong. Here. Laurenti. Drury. Roberts. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Heidi. And I would invite members of the audience to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the meeting over to the Mayor and his presentation of the 2019 budget. Mayor?
Well, thank you and good evening again. So this is a summary of the 2019 proposed budget. Just so everyone knows, I won't be voting on this budget tonight. This is the initial proposal. Afterwards, I'll provide the copies of the presentation to the media and the council, and as the next few days go by, some other supporting documentation to the council as well. A couple of other issues that are being outlined in this budget presentation will as well not have votes cast on them tonight. This is just a forecast as to what your job is going to be over the next month or two from here on out. So, look at the local economy here. Our South Dakota's gross domestic product growth in 2017 was 0.3. It's very minimal growth. That ranks us 45th out of 50 states. That's a fall from 18th in the nation a year ago to 45th this year. Nationally, the GDP rose 2.1%, so we're way behind. We have seen a rebound in the first quarter of 2018, where we're seeing the growth around 3.1% in South Dakota and 2.2% in the U.S. South Dakota personal income grew by 1.4% compared to 3.1% nationally. Again, not something to feel real comfortable with. South Dakota non-farm income increased by 2.6% against a 3.2% national growth. And the South Dakota farm income declined by 41.8% compared to 6.9% decline nationally. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. The CPI calculation for 2019 is 1.7%. That's a measure of inflation. Rapid City general tax Taxable sales increased by 1.8% in 2017. South Dakota was up about 1.05. Retail trade up 0.9%. In South Dakota, it was a little less, 0.5. Services in Rapid City up 0.7. South Dakota was 1.4. Rapid City population has been climbing slowly but surely, now estimated at 75,488 as of the end of 2017. It's a 2.3% increase from 2016. So our growth rate is a little bit greater than the national average. Tourism. Tourism tax collections, $853 million statewide in 2017, a 2.7% increase. $244 million of that in Pennington County alone, or in other words, 28.6% of all South Dakota tourism tax collections occurred right here in Pennington County. 7.4 increase from 2016. That's good news. For comparison, Minnehaha County had 121 million, or 14% of South Dakota, and they saw a little decrease. Rapid City Gross Municipal Receipts Tax, or otherwise known as the BBB tax, Bed, Booze, and Board Tax, taxable sales increased by 3.35% in 2017. And the Rapid City Regional Airport set a record with almost 596,000 passengers flying into or out of Rapid City Regional Airport in 2017. More good news. Rapid City's general sales tax collections for the first 5 months from the years 2011 through 2018 is depicted here in this graph. And you can see we had a minor decrease in 2013, but other than that, we see a long, relatively straight and slightly upward trend. In the first 5 months, just $200,000 more than this time last year. So it's not spectacular, but it's going in the right direction. Building permit totals. Of course, as we know, 2016 and 17, we've had two $300 million years. That is a big deal because it was just about in 2011 when we had our first $200 million year for building permit valuations. And so we just keep that for 5 years and jump straight to $300 million. That's been a very good year for all of us. Now if we look at building permit totals for the first 6 months of each year, we can see that 2018 is the best year so far. And we're well on our way to that $300 million mark. So here's the good news. Our GDP is up, although minimally. The non-farm income, taxable sales, population, tourism, the BBB, and employment's all up. This is a good set of indicators for a community that makes the bulk of its income on sales tax. Here's the other news. The other news is this farm income really takes away everything that we've been recently celebrating with our increases. If there's ever a year to wonder what type of impact on our economy the agriculture industry has, this is one of those years. When they're not making money, they're not spending it. And we're one of the places that they like to spend this money in the most. So we can expect some flat sales tax throughout this period. 2019 budget highlights. General fund revenue from 2018-2019 up about 0.95%. Should note that last year, or this current year, 2018, we used $1.35 million of undesignated cash as revenue to balance that budget. This year in 19, we have used no undesignated cash. So we're just about flat, but 0.95% increase. Here's a visual of the general fund revenue, how it comes in: 44% sales tax, 27% property tax, and then the multiple other categories that you see there. License and permits, 4%. Grants and intergovernment revenue, 5%. Interdepartmental charges, 9%. General fund expenditures. We're still expending from the 2018 budget, so these are the 2018 original budget numbers. There are some changes between 2018 and 19 that I've marked with an asterisk for a little extra explanation. For one, the mayor's office is up 18.2%, and that really is a holdover from the community services department's reorganization. And during this time period, we're taking on the communications position into the mayor's office. The council budget is barely up just a little bit. I've made some additional funding available for travel and training, which is something I've talked to several council members about, and I agree that that's a very important part of the council budget. I've added council contingency this year because even though you've done fine without it for the last year or two, I hear those opportunities throughout the year at council meetings when we find ourselves in need of a study or something of that nature that comes up in real time that has no funding. And you don't have to spend it, but I believe it's important to have it there because the 2019 will happen on its own timetable. It's not already happening now, and so it's hard to predict what we will need. Down to community development, there is about a $330,000 increase for 12.6%, and the entirety of that increase is federal funding that's been made available for some type of a transportation study, and so there's offsetting revenue, and this additional expense will be funding that study. And on to the next page. We have City Hall maintenance, which shows almost $100,000 increase, and that's part of the believe it when you see it final execution of this plan between the city and schools. When they move to a different place, we'll be taking over maintenance, which is now shared between the city and schools. Detox, or the organization formerly named Detox, yet to have a new name, is opening in its new location on Kansas City Street at the former NAU administration building on Kansas City. There are increased services and increased expenses, and as you probably remember, the city and county share those expenses 50-50 to make that operation work. And down to the Black Hills Council of Local Governments. I'm going to talk more about this a little bit later, but this has to do with an opportunity to work together with the Black Hills Council of Local Governments on a greater level, and it equates ultimately to a cost savings as we go through the budget here. I'll explain more later. The Chamber of Commerce up top have not received an increase from the city in many, many years, and so they asked for more than this. I split the difference and have put in a few $1,000s there for that. The other subsidies that you see up here, the Journey, Cornerstone, Lifeways, Performing Arts, Early Childhood Connections, the Arts Contingency, and the Human Services Contingency, I applied a 2.5% decrease in those. There were some challenges balancing this budget this year, and everyone, practically everyone who gets city funding has contributed to balancing this 2019 budget. So total general fund budget net of interdepartmental charges, $60,518,494. And again, a visual of where we spend our money. I've created some categories of spending in order to create this graph. So for example, public safety, I have police, fire, detox, dispatch, emergency management, search and rescue, the Humane Society, and working against violence. Those are what I would consider to be essential services that the city would have to replicate if we didn't have partners providing them. So that makes up half of our general fund budget right there. Administration at 6%, that includes the mayor's office, city council, city attorney, human resources, information technology, building maintenance, and the finance department. We then see these standalone pieces of the pie that is public works, community development, library, and parks and recreation. And then the city partners at 1%, and that's Black Hills Council of Local Governments, Rapid City Chamber of Commerce, and Economic Development. And then arts and culture at just a little bit over 1% of our general fund budget, and that is the DAL, or the Arts Council, the Journey Museum and Learning Center, the Performing Arts, and the Arts Contingency Fund as well, for a total of $690,000. Enterprise, special revenue, and internal service funds. There's a lot of numbers here, a lot of categories. There's no real benefit probably to going through each one of these, but these are the departments that have either their own funding, grant funding, are funded by other departments, or funded by customers. And some of these are self-explanatory, some are not. Under community development, for example, code enforcement, that's $55,651. That's actually a demolition fund. That doesn't fund code enforcement, that's for demolition of buildings. The community development, that is the community development block grant, and then the fire and life safety for $353. I think this is the hazard mitigation grant. And then risk management under city attorney, that $2,246,000 is the cost of, that is a fund for workers' comp and liability insurance. CIP, education loan, vision fund, parks and recreation, the public library, the library board item at $77,050. State law provides for fines to be, when fines are paid on books, it can go into a fund to be used by the library, and that's how we document this particular area. So all of the enterprise, special revenue, and internal service funds, $104,855,697 for a 0.82% increase over last year. Major challenges for the budget year ahead. Over-reliance on sales tax revenue creates a nearly unpredictable long-range revenue forecast. Sales tax is the most volatile source, and too many factors can disrupt it. In the previous graph, we saw that all of our indicators are really going good, but the farm income was down. Next year, perhaps farm income's up, maybe tourism will be down, maybe, but all of these things are a threat to that sales tax revenue, something that we use 44%, something we use to fund 44% of our general fund. Demand for city services is increasing. Our population growth over the last 11 years has been 9%. The city area has increased 1.6 square miles. We're around 57 square miles now. In the last 11 years, we've added 2,401 single-family residential properties and 1,829 multifamily residential properties. Our lane miles have increased by 140 miles, or 12.5%. And cumulatively, from 2007 through 2017, the CPI increase has been 16%. So there's demand for city services, and the service providers, the men and women who are out in the city working, sense not only an increase in volume of those services, but a change in scope of those services as well. People are in fact looking to the government for more services, And those issues really have to be vetted. We just can't say yes to all of the requests. It takes a real conscious effort to make sure we're providing the right services. More major challenges. It's been a challenge balancing the 2019 general fund budget. The revenue has not been keeping up with the expenses. The increased need and expectation on human services delivery. And really one of the dilemmas this year has been balancing this budget versus creating a sustainable budget. And I'm not sure today which one we have created. More information will become available as time goes on. In fact, by this Friday, I've asked the department directors to send me a list of any potential service impacts that they will be seeing due to this balanced budget. Multi-year union contracts are executed without regard for city revenue. And the 2019 reductions are made only partially on priority-based budgeting and citizen survey data. Those tools are primarily intended for and most beneficial for reallocation of resources, not elimination of them. And so we got to some point in the budget balancing exercise where all the science was no longer useful, and we went strictly to our math skills. So that's where I go back to wondering if it's a sustainable budget or just a balanced budget. We have lack of consensus on the use of undesignated cash. And this isn't a problem this year because we're not using any. So it's a perfect time to start finding out what we can agree on and perhaps coming up with a reserve policy that will give direction to us and future city administration on the use of undesignated cash and reserves. Major opportunities. Fee adjustments. Building permits is our first step in the revenue diversification effort. The CDBG grant, Community Development Block Grant. There were some changes in the grant and our available cash to be used for administration of that grant. We have reached out and spoken to the Black Hills Council of Local Government. This is not a signed agreement yet. This is a proposal. And they are going to take over some of the duties that currently some of the 2.5 employees assigned to the CDBG grant are doing. There's an opening. We've had a resignation in that office, and we're planning on not filling that position. Some of the duties will be taken over by the Black Hills Council of Local Government. And for an additional fee, they will handle even more of those duties so that we can forego replacing that opening. This will ultimately, we saw an increase in the city general fund subsidy to this grant program, double from last year to this year, from 60-some thousand to 120,000. And now we've taken that down to about 85 or 86,000 with the help with this potential agreement. Still, we are looking for a new grant administration partner, someone to take over the overall administration of the grant. The City of Rapid City will still receive the benefits from it. We're going to keep it here local, but I think that we can find a better way to administer this grant outside of government, perhaps. New sales tax revenue forecast methodology based on past performance and current trends, and something we think will be better for the long-term financial planning. And the future of online sales tax submissions, which this, I'll say it again later, it's too early to determine if there's going to be even a dollar in there for the City of Rapid City, let alone $5 million. There's a lot of talk about it, and it just doesn't pay to give serious consideration to this at this point in time. The arena construction will be taking place in 2019. Vision Fund process will be opened hopefully tonight, and those awards and those improvements to the community will be made starting in 2019 as well. More major opportunities. The population is increasing. The building industry is booming. The Mount Rushmore Road corridor, something to be proud of. Mount Rushmore Road construction is done after only 25 years of constant construction, so it seems. But the road itself is done, but the corridor extending out to the south border of Rapid City is really coming along and is something very impressive and something to keep our eye on and be proud of. Elevate Rapid City so far, and this is not complete yet. The organization of this entity is not complete. We're having planning meetings now. No one's ready to ask the council for any money specifically. That creation of that organization should be complete here, I would guess, in the next month. And I would expect in the Vision Fund we would see a request for Elevate Rapid City. But so far, this is shaping up to be, at least in my mind, in my time here, the greatest public-private partnership that we've seen, where the private funding will come in somewhere between 60 and 70% to public funding. So more on this later, but this is a great opportunity. The new sales tax forecasting methodology. The current method is to take the previous full year plus 2%, plus another 2%. That accounts for the previous year, the current year, in an effort to predict the future year. So if you're a math person, that equates to 2017 sales tax receipts multiplied times 1.0404. We currently use 2%. I don't know what we used to use back in the days when we had higher sales tax predictions, or we realized higher sales tax increases, but we've arrived at 2%, and it doesn't necessarily reflect a long-term forecast, and really doesn't take into account the local trends. So there's a better way to do long-term forecasting and to do a 5-year outlook. The new method, combination of 3 time series models based on a robust and widely accepted scientific approach, uses all available data, suitable for long-term projections and a 5-year outlook, and it's updated on a monthly basis, so this is something that can potentially change in real time as the trends start to reveal themselves. And so that creates a slightly different calculation for the 2019 revenue, which is the 2017 receipts times 1.053. Building permit fee analysis. Valuations are susceptible to underestimation due to self-reporting. The fee schedule has not been updated in more than 25 years. In fact, we believe it's 27 years. With inflation, more of the project's value falls into a lower fee bracket, causing fee revenues to lag behind inflation. And what this means, if you don't fully understand the issue here, is that one of our brackets is in the first $100,000. After $100,000, the fee changes. And so in 1991, I had a house built for $73,000. And so all of that was in that $100,000 bracket. Today, the same house to build would be around $180,000. And so the first $100,000 would be in that bracket, and anything over $100,000, the fee would be less per square foot than the first $100,000. So if you can imagine, it's not hard to imagine, in 1991, the average home price was something around that $100,000 range. Today, it is much higher. Very typical to have entire neighborhoods going up with $300,000 to $400,000 homes. So we've calculated this loss in revenue to be about 0.9% annually. So the proposed solution is to use the International Code Council building valuation data if the documentation is not present. What that means is you can get a valuation on your project by coming to the building services counter, and if you choose to, show a construction contract with construction estimates, or allow the building official to find the valuation of that project. And almost no one brings in a contract, because realistically, with the current system and with the new system, the valuation by the building official will result in a permit that costs less than if we were to bring in construction contracts. So this will employ a flat rate of $5.50 per $1,000 valuation for both residential and commercial. And the minimum to cover inspection costs will go from $37 to $43. The impact, it will create a level playing field due to the standardized building valuation method. This will result, based on past information, result on a 9.7% increase in building permit revenue for the city in 2019. It will eliminate the graduated brackets and will allow permit fees to be automatically adjusted for inflation. So when we set the flat rate, we'll never have to address the inflation issue again. It will automatically adjust. And most projects will see a fee decrease. In fact, we analyzed the last 5 years of building projects, and 92% of those will have a fee decrease in the new system. 8% will have a fee increase, and some of those fee increases are fairly substantial, 20 to 30% in some cases. But those projects are by far the minority of the projects. And the timeline for this, if we're to implement anything new with building permit fees, it will need to have final approval by the end of this year. So it's nothing that needs to be voted on tonight or this month. There's a lot of time to vet this, to exchange information, to hear all sides, and to really find out what is in the best interests of everyone to do. And the building permit fee analysis, I just added this slide to show that this was part of the community survey that we did. Land use, planning, zoning, code enforcement, building permits and inspection. It's all a service that the citizens believed we should maintain the service levels, and a few people wanted to raise the taxes for it, but the majority of them wanted to raise user fees for it. And of course there is on building permits and inspection, there is 37% of the people that want to stop doing it altogether, which is also an option the council has. So here's the summary. The general fund budget is balanced. City services will remain mostly as they are today. More information coming on any changes later. Some of Rapid City's budget woes are self-imposed. Sales tax collections are susceptible to negative influence from various sources. All the stars have to line up in order to have a banner year for sales tax collections. And protecting the city's interests is the same as protecting the taxpayer interests. So, my final comments here. For me, the theme of this year's budget preparation and presentation has been that the budget has two sides, expenses and revenues. If I would have constructed a set of circumstances to make a point about our 2019 budget, I could not have put together a more perfect set of circumstances than what we have seen develop organically. There's been an overemphasis on expenses while there's been a lack of appropriate attention on revenue. You don't have to believe me just because I say it. The condition of our water rates is a prominent example of this issue. Obviously, ignoring these unpopular issues creates a feeling of harmony, but pushing the issue onto a future generation is counterproductive in my own opinion, unacceptable. I'm here to tell you that this year, more than ever, we are the next generation. We are the ones, the people in the past, have pushed this issue onto. It's easy to see, and it's going to be even easier to see over time, the amount of backlash over attempting to adjust certain rates to an appropriate level. This backlash would not have occurred if it would have come in small incremental changes over years and decades. But I have to say, as an elected official and someone who's only been an elected official a few years, it's easy to see from the inside that the system tries to teach people like us not to mess with this. Avoid it. There's more trouble, perhaps, than what it's worth. This may be the point in this speech where someone is thinking that that's not my job. But I'm here to affirm, in case there's any doubt, that it's all of our jobs. There's senior staff members in the halls of this building who have stories about attempting to adjust fees and rates in the past and have been shot down by previous mayors or councils. This has had an institutional demotivating effect on the staff. Right now, there are individuals and groups mounting defenses to the proposed rate increases, and you'll get to hear all of those arguments, and we'll be at a decision point. Sorry, I get choked up when I talk about you guys. You'll be at a decision point sooner than later. To do what is pleasing or to do what is needed. And if this were an easy job, everyone would want to do it. Flat sales tax collections is a national trend, and it has been for a few years, and we can bank on a few more years of it. And only a fool would put a great amount of stock at this point in the potential windfall of cash coming from online sales tax collection. But we, the tax-spending government, urge people to shop locally, and whether or not it's intended, the message we're delivering is this: shop locally so that we can get your sales tax dollars. And where there's some truth in that message, since people want government services and funding is required for those services, the more important, I believe, would be this: shop locally out of loyalty to your community. Your neighbors own the hardware store. The kids down the street serve you chicken wings on Friday night. Your son or daughter may sell popcorn at the local movie theater. Hotels, restaurants, department stores, sporting goods, furniture, and any type of private business you can imagine. The people who make their living at these places are people who live in our neighborhoods. So recently, I'm going to confess an embarrassing thing here. It has nothing to do with Russians. But I wanted an oil drain pan. But I didn't want a plastic one. I wanted a metal one, an older fashioned one. A metal oil drain pan. So I went to a couple of stores and I couldn't find it. So I went on Amazon Prime, and found what I wanted and bought it, and it was $11.99. It came in a couple days, free shipping. I was proud of myself. Now I got a metal drain pan. A couple days later, I was in a local hardware store, saw the exact same metal drain pan for $6, half the cost, and I felt stupid. I'd already used the other drain pan. Me going to Amazon was not trying to keep from paying any kind of tax. It was out of laziness. I didn't want to invest any more time running around or calling anyone or doing any of those things that we probably would be doing every day 20, 30, 40 years ago. So over the past few years during budget season, I've delivered a few warnings about our over-reliance on sales tax, the need to diversify our revenue by updating fees. We heard virtual gasps from the audience and even earned a cautionary editorial from the local newspaper just by talking about it. It's just not something the city of Rapid City can do and get away with it. But the energy companies, the cable company, the mechanic, the plumber, well, that's different. But when it comes to the city, there's a much higher standard for raising a fee. One of the major areas that we as a system failed to take revenue into account was during the negotiation of union contracts. For both sides, union and city, it's more convenient to have multi-year contracts. But what's not convenient or appropriate, however, is that the union contracts are agreed upon assuming the city revenue will be there. For example, in 2019, preparing this budget, the general fund union-driven wage increases were calculated at $750,000. Given the other increases in products and services, general overhead, operating costs, the money does not exist in the 2019 anticipated revenue stream. In fact, in order to balance this budget without using revenue, without using reserves, I've taken back $538,000 out of that $750,000. One of our unions is set to receive a very small increase in their wages in 2019, and the other two unions have declined our request to reopen wage negotiations. As a result, and out of necessity, those wages will be increased at the expense of operating revenue within those affected departments, and that is not a sustainable practice. I've brought it up before and I'll continue to bring it up again, but the answer to this is to negotiate differently. And when I'm saying this, I'm not just saying it to you, I'm also saying it to me, because I was part of this. I had the opportunity to review and approve or disapprove, just like everyone. We have to negotiate differently and consider the city and union interests equally. Unfortunately, when someone like me is talking about something like this, sometimes unions take these type of statements as threats. But I'm just here to tell you this is simply reality. It is a math problem. The next scheduled negotiations for our three unions are 2019, 2020, and 2022. I presented a good deal of information tonight, tossed around a bunch of numbers, and it makes it very difficult to digest. The Mayor's office will make the supporting documentation available and provide a copy of the presentation to the press. And I'll end tonight's presentation with a very important footnote, a caveat. For the last several weeks and months, this budget process has occurred and it has changed in real time, sometimes as often as every day. The target budget amounts have been very fluid. The department directors and I believe we can make these figures work. However, there are some questions I can't answer tonight. I cannot tell you exactly which services, if any, will be affected by the budget reductions that have taken place. I think we'll be able to start having those as early as this coming Friday, an estimation by department directors. Department directors have gone through quite a bit of stress and hard work to get to the point where we are. The finance office has been awesome. All of the department directors have worked as hard as they can possibly work to make this, to keep this budget in line. So, with that, I'll take any questions, or you can defer questions for a later time, or Madam Chair, the meeting is back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we start answering our questions based on the Mayor's presentation tonight, I'd like to give an update as far as what we are looking at for budget hearings. We're kind of looking at holding one or two. If we hold one, we'll schedule an additional one. If we hold two scheduled, we'll hold an additional third one just in case anything comes up. I would recommend that the City Council members tonight think about any questions to the mayor or making any request of the mayor for his staff to bring forward any type of additional information that may be helpful as we go through and digest this presentation that will help us in order to hopefully get through the budget hearings on a timely time frame. So I do have a couple city council members in the queue. There will be a poll that will go out to city council members to try to set those dates in August, if at all possible. So I'd ask you to kind of take a look at your calendars. The survey will go out tomorrow, and we'll see when we can get those scheduled in the month of August. So that, because we do have to have 2 readings of the budget for 2019 approved by city council before October 1st. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to answer questions and to get as much transparency answering our questions as well as citizens' questions. So Mayor, thank you for offering up answering questions. The first city council member in the queue is Alderman Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we need a motion to acknowledge the presentation for starters? I'll make a motion to acknowledge if I can retain the floor.
I've got a motion by Solomon to acknowledge the mayor's 2019 budget presentation, second by Laurenti. Alderman Solomon, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you for the presentation. Thank you to the city staff for tightening the belts. I know that is difficult to do, but it's obviously needed, and we don't want to project and lean too heavy on any online sales tax. And, you know, one thing that definitely stands out in this budget season, as it has really every one of them, is the impact of the agricultural community and the economy that happens there. And if you don't think it affects Rapid City, I think this year you definitely see it. Mr. Mayor, does this budget include your increase in building permit revenue?
It does.
Okay, so it's built in. You know, I think as this discussion on the building permits is obviously a hot topic, but you know, my question for you is, why didn't you meet ahead of time with those most affected to see if we can come to an agreement on a standardized method? If the one we have is broken, why not meet ahead of time to talk about what other communities are doing, as you found out, and maybe have a game plan with those most affected, particularly the development community? It seems like the one thing is we saw the increase, and there might be a need for a better formula or standardization across the board. I don't disagree with that. But I wonder why we didn't have those conversations ahead of time and why they had to find out when you're presenting your budget with it already built in.
Well, we did a great amount of research to find out what's happening in other communities, to find out best practices on standardization. And given the fact that it was closer to budget deadline than it was to policy approval deadline, taking into account there's 90 to 120 days left to vet this single issue. I think that's plenty of time. I really don't see me meeting behind the scenes with the people most affected could have been productive. Because I know what their position will be. We did the research based on what the best practices are, what would be best to recover the lost inflationary lag that we've experienced over the last 27 years, but at the very least to stop it from occurring into the future. So that's it. I didn't realize it's going to come across like a personal attack.
Well, and a personal attack from you to them, is that what you meant?
Yeah.
From me to you. Okay. So
You to me is a given, but
oh, you know. You know, I think that might be one of the concerns. You have a concern, obviously, of what that, we know there's some revenue to the community, but will the ramifications of this be greater than the revenue that the city might see? And those are the questions I think we have to wrestle with. Is there's certainly a revenue increase of a couple $100,000 this year and moving forward. But what are the ramifications? And those kind of conversations I think we'd like to have. And obviously those are policy discussions, but since this is built into the budget, it means we have to have this discussion now rather than later. And so that's why I asked that, is because you built it into the budget, and, we're absorbing this information, and we're trying to say, okay, if we do this, there's revenue, and then that's coming from somewhere. Who pays for it? And are there any ramifications? Will development slow down, which is instead of speed up? And, we want growth, and growth pays for things. And so that's kind of the position that we're at. That's why I direct the question to you that way. And I know we don't want to get too much into all the weeds today. That was just a general discussion. Since that's obviously a hot topic, I wanted to give you an opportunity to address that, and so I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Well, and keep in mind, there's 90 to 120 days to vet this. You do not have to approve this building permit issue on the same timetable you approve the budget. If things change and you deny or alter the building permit proposal, then the first supplement of the year can be to adjust the revenue.
So just as since you made that comment real quick, yeah, but we'd have to figure out where that 200,000 is going to come from. That's right, or more cuts. So that's my only thing, is I kind of feel like we have to have this discussion now, even though it's policy, because otherwise we're taking it from somebody, and I'm sure we have a lot of nervous department directors wondering if it's coming from their areas, or maybe other subsidies. So, all right, I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for your presentation tonight. I'm not afraid of the conversation. I mean, I think it's important that we need to have it. I agree with you that we have plenty of time to vet this out. It might have helped, I think, Alderman Solomon's, to his point, I think it might have helped anticipate some of the direction that there would, pushback there would be, which might help shaping what we might do throughout the budget hearings. But I think it would be minor. I think we have plenty of time to get there before we have to have this budget finalized. The dollar figure, I don't know if you mentioned it. What's the dollar figure that's baked into the budget based on fee increases?
$203,000.
$203,000. So, to me, that's fairly minor in my opinion, based on the size of the budget, just the general fund. So that's a little easier to swallow, honestly. I mean, I get nobody likes to have their fees increased. We've all heard it. We saw the vote of the people on the water fees, because honestly, they didn't care about how we were raising water fees, whether it was by resolution or the other way. They were voting on the fact that their water rates were going up. So we all understand that. And I agree with the mayor that there have been too many councils in the past that have done what's popular and not necessarily what's right, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And I mean, there are many other avenues that I could easily argue for, but when we're not taking care of our fee structure to handle our infrastructure properly, because we want to be popular and continue to be elected, well, you're not being a leader, in my opinion. And so I think it's important that we need to tackle it. And I agree with the mayor that it has not been handled for quite a few years, because I've been here for 8 years so far, and I've seen it happen on this very council. I'm not saying I'm for all of the increases, but I'm willing to tackle the issue and do what's right, especially when it comes to our infrastructure. Other areas, I think there are other areas we could maybe borrow from or cut if necessary to make those things happen as well. We have funding mechanisms that we can use for infrastructure. We all are aware of them. It's whether we have the will to do it. So, I mean, there are other ways to fund it other than just directly taking it as a greater fee. But that's something we need to debate, and during the budget hearings. It's just a matter of votes. I know we understand, all of us understand that there are pots of money, and we like to say, well, vision is a pot of money that, you know, we just don't want to touch that because, well, it needs to go to these particular items. But that's because that's what we want to support. If we want to use these things for infrastructure, like the mayor presented in last year's budget, where we trimmed some of that vision fund out of it and put it into CIP, that was a great move. It was a great move by the mayor, and it was a great move by the council to support that, because we needed to do that. That's part of our infrastructure, CIP. So I'm willing to tackle these issues, and I appreciate the mayor bringing up the conversation, and I'm glad he's not afraid to do so. I yield.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to get on the record real quick with one thing about this, and we have plenty of time to discuss it, but I will say, just by a show of hands of the contractors in the audience, how many of you ever self-reported valuations to City Hall? That's, okay, maybe one. I've never done it. I've pulled like 50 building permits in this town. I don't know where that's coming from, but I've always relied on the staff to do it, and they've always done a decent job, but I haven't really, I mean, a couple dollars here or there, I've argued with them, but not really. It's always been done pretty well. So when I saw that self-reporting thing, I just thought that really jumped out at me as something that I've never done on any building permit I've ever pulled. Maybe it happens on the smaller remodel jobs, but on the bigger jobs, I don't think it happens when you drop a set of plans off. Just not something I've ever encountered myself. And just a reminder for all the folks up here when we get to this subject, and I'm saying this now because it's a little more airtime with it, but affordable housing is obviously almost at a crisis in this country, and especially in this town. So just think about that when you're going forward. And it is a big deal. I know it sounds like it's not, but it really is a big deal. Every time we say we want affordable housing in this town, but every time we get a chance to do something about it, we vote against it. And so I just want to make sure you guys really think about that when you make your votes up here for that. And also, I don't know, there's some questions about the legality of using fees to fund a general fund. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't have to we'll ask that a question later, I guess, when we have more time to go into it. But anyway, those are I want to make sure it's on the record, because I've never self-reported evaluation of anything I've ever done. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam President. And I will have to agree with Mr. Lewis here. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody that's self-reported yet. I'm still looking for that person. But I just want to bring something up real quick. A client of mine just finished a small remodel project on a commercial space, and he paid for building permits and inspections and blah, blah, everything, that was done by the city, just a little over twice of what it would have cost in Sioux Falls. So I think we need to look at what other communities in South Dakota are doing too, because I did compare what we're doing now to Sioux Falls, what they're doing for 2018, and we're already quite a bit higher than they are at this point without changing anything. So, I don't necessarily think that we're that far behind anybody. When you're comparing apples to oranges and you're comparing places around the country, because I did see some of the places that we're compared to. In fact, I've lived in a couple of them, like Beaverton, Oregon, that has Nike for one of their employers that has, 30,000 employees in one building. So, we really can't compare that to Rapid City, South Dakota, where our biggest employer in Rapid is a nonprofit. So, and in the top 10 employers in Rapid City, they're nonprofits and government agencies. So, there's a lot of people that come in. There's a lot of people that are self-employed, and even these little increments make a big deal to them. I know that we've got a bad reputation in Rapid City as far as how difficult it can be to build commercially and residentially, and that's something we need to get beyond. But when you're raising your fees to pad your general fund, that really isn't giving the kind of perception I want to put out there to the builders and the contractors and the people that want to move to Rapid City. So I think there's other ways that we can find to generate $200,000. I don't necessarily disagree that we need to not look at our fee structures on everything. I think there's things that we probably are lagging behind on, and we're going to be going to one of them later tonight. But I think that a lot of times, perception for some people is reality. So we may be doing something that may not affect people that much, but what they perceive and what people perceive that are looking at Rapid City can still be a negative thing. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of discussion on this. I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is, okay, this is built into the budget right now. What happens if in November or December we decide we don't want to change these fees? where's that money going to come from? And I think that's something that needs to be a discussion too going forward, because that could likely happen. So where are we going to bring that money from? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drew.
Thank you. Just a quick comment as I listen to everyone speak. I could support the fee increase. I mean, it's been a long time. I would go out and say that's something I could support. But I'd also like to see the customer service and the way that we work with our developers improve. And, you know, I'm not trying to downgrade the staff or anything, but I've heard so many complaints on how long it takes when you pull a permit and it sits on someone's desk for 2 months. So if we're going to ask for more money, we should deliver better service. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief couple of comments. Mayor, as you know, I'm very protective of their unions and the union negotiation process. So I do want to applaud you for opening the communications, because I did see that communication taking place with some of the other line items that we've had to have serious cuts. By the way, this is my first time that we've had to do some serious cuts to any of our budgets since I've been on the City Council. So that communication, I think, is very important in getting that information relayed to whoever has to take it, the shortfall. The other part, I want to, again, I just applaud you for attempting that communication process and opening up the dialogue. The other area that we need to talk a little bit more about is the reserve policy, the rainy day fund, and how that's going to be set forward, the process on that. I'd like to see a little bit more transparency on how that is going to be coming about. And then I know you mentioned it as well, Mayor, just a little, and I don't need an answer right now, but just a little bit of a clarification on the CIP budgeting, and then what the water rates, how that's built into the CIP process. And again, that'll be a question for a later time. So I thank you for listening to and indulging our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you have any other comments based on the questions so far? I just have a comment towards the end, and I'll offer you the opportunity before I make my final comment.
No, I'm done.
All right, thank you. So basically, I've asked the City Council members to think about any type of supporting data. The Mayor has indicated he's going to provide the media as well as the City Council the presentation and the background information that goes with this. Personal note, I've already reached out on behalf of the City Council to the Finance Office and asked for the breakdown of the interdepartmental charges. The Mayor may have already included that in his supporting data, but I did notice besides the $203,000 in fees that were added as a revenue stream, it appeared as if, because it flashed by quickly, that another $200,000 was part of the interdepartmental charges as far as the increase. And I know the Mayor was working on a plan of restructuring those interdepartmental charges. So just a redefinition and clarification, the general fund provides some services to our enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are funded by fees, rates and fees. And the general fund is generally supported by fees for building permits and stuff, but also has the sales tax and the property tax that funds those services within the general fund. And so we want to make sure that we're not basically robbing Peter to pay Paul in a lot of these things. So again, I'll just reiterate, if the City Council members can think of any other supporting data once they start reviewing this, I think it is beneficial and helpful and nice if we give the Mayor and the staff as much heads up as we can in order to provide us that information before our first budget hearing. So with that said, without seeing any other discussions, thank you, Mayor, for your presentation tonight. We'll look forward to the updates and the availability of those reports. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. I've got a motion by Drury to adjourn. Oh, thank you. Sorry. We do have an acknowledgement of the presentation. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The acknowledgement has been approved of the 2019
Second.
I've got a motion by Drury to adjourn, second by Solomon. And prior to adjourning, just to let everyone know, we're going to take a 10-minute recess and then start our city council meeting. So all in favor of adjournment? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.